Hey, this is David, pastor of Hamilton Life, and I want to thank you for taking a listen to our podcast. For more information on our church and how you can support the ministry, you can visit us online at hamiltonlifechurch.com. Thanks again for taking a listen, and we hope you enjoyed the podcast today.
How's it going? Good, okay, so we want to make sure everybody's in a good mood. If you're not, you can step out because you're going to crush our vibe. You know what I mean? Like, let's all be in a good mood today. We're happy to be here. We're in a conversation called in Ephesians, where we are looking at Ephesians at an intimate level, and we're doing this all summer. So we'll work through this 10, maybe 11 weeks. And what's been so beautiful, and what I intended and hoped would happen, is that we would be able to see how every passage we've worked through so far has worked together. That the overarching theme throughout Ephesians is unity and holiness. And we started where I talked about the importance of holiness and how it grounds us. That unity and holiness starts with me and you, making a conscious decision to pursue Christ. And so we've walked through over the last couple of weeks. Keith Troop did a wonderful job bringing the Word. And then last week, AJ did a wonderful job bringing the Word. If you haven't heard them, go back and listen. I listened on my way to work this morning, and I'm like, man, AJ knocked it out of the park. He talked about community. But I love that we're looking at this book holistically. We're looking at how each individual piece and each chapter and each verse fits together. And I love that we can look at it individually, and last week we can go, yeah, I got to be in community. But it's not just community. It's overarching, it's holistic. And so this morning, what I want to do is I want to talk about unity. I want us to talk about unity because without community and unity, then we are nothing. And I feel like we're working actively towards community. But I feel like we have to fight for unity. In fact, if you look at the church's description on our website, HamiltonLifeChurch.com, there's something somewhere buried in what we believe that talks about fighting for unity. That I feel like as a community of faith, as a church, as a tribe, we have to fight for unity. Not fight, sometimes no, we fight with the fisticuffs, but I believe we have to fight for unity. We have to actively make it priority. And it's not my responsibility as a pastor of this church to create unity. It's our responsibility as members and people who partake to work towards creating unity in the faith. And it's critical, it's important. So I want us to talk a little bit about that. But first I want to tell you that Friday, August 16th, 2013, will go down in history as one of the darkest 5 minutes. Google went black. 5 minutes. Google completely went out. Drive, everything Google search, everything. I'm sure lots of marriages ended in those 5 minutes because they could not solve problems over Google searches. Everything went black for 5 minutes. It's estimated that it cost Google $500,000 in 5 minutes of darkness. In 5 minutes, the world realized how much we rely on Google. In fact, the more I say it, one of my devices is probably going to pick it up and start answering questions that I have if they preach this message for you. I don't know. The idea, though, is that Google proved to us through 5 minutes of darkness how critical it is because over 1 billion questions are answered every day around the world. Through Google. It's critical. And what's beautiful, and I'm a bit of a geek in that I've been following some of the stories behind how these companies began. And we went through a big tech boom, and it was really unique. But what's fascinating is how Google has used people's efforts and their skills to create this beautiful search engine that we now rely solely upon for everything, especially to get song lyrics right. We rely on every bit of it. But what I've noticed about Google is that Google does a fantastic job of connecting me and you to information. But they don't create information. Google does a great job of connecting us to content, but Google in and of itself does not create content necessarily. If you go to Google search something, most likely a Wikipedia page is going to come up. Wikipedia pages could be written by any one of us that we create. We take information from people, their efforts, their skills, their knowledge, their passions, their love, and they placed it on the internet, and Google has connected us to content. But do you know what Google has not done very well? Google has not done a good job connecting us to people. By show of hands, Chris has already proved that we hate this, but by show of hands, how many of you are still on the social media sites Google+? Exactly. Because Google has done a poor job of connecting us to one another, but what they have done is connect us to content. What I've found to be the case when we look at the context of this information in a church is as a people, we can be connected to a church. But that doesn't ensure that we're connected to one another. That doesn't even ensure that we're connected to God. That we can be connected to an institution or a message, but it doesn't mean that we're connected to God and to one another. And part of the reason why I'm so thankful that you're here is because this is an opportunity for us to connect. Now, I know when you're not here, you're listening to podcasts. I know because I track podcast listens like a weirdo. I can see where you're listening the messages, whether it's mine or someone else's. I know that we have a fan in London, right? Shout out to London, am I right? Come on. We have people who listen overseas, right? They're probably famous somewhere in some weird, obscure area. The idea is that I can see where these are coming from. I know you're listening to the podcast, and it's fantastic. It's a good way for us to connect. But nothing replaces what we're doing right here. Face to face, eyeball to eyeball, breathing in and out the exact same air. It's kind of gross, but we're doing that. We're here. We're high-fiving and side-hugging, and we're doing these things together because nothing can replace what's happening here. So you can be connected to a church, and you can be connected to the gospel message of Jesus, but that doesn't ensure that you're connected to one another. But Paul in Ephesians carves this out. In the passage we're going to read today, in Ephesians 4, he starts out in verse 1, he says, "Therefore I, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk worthy of the calling you have received, with all humility and gentleness and patience, accepting one another in love, diligently keeping the unity of the Spirit with the peace that binds us." As we look at this passage, we realize that Paul begins by saying, "I, a prisoner of the Lord." Now, at first read, you're like, okay, yeah, maybe, but in context, Paul is actually a prisoner of Rome. He is writing to the church of Ephesus from prison, behind bars, and his opening statement is, "I, a prisoner of the Lord." And I love looking at why. I love looking at how a prisoner of Rome could actually see himself less as a prisoner of Rome, but more as a prisoner of God. That he's carving out this idea that in context, he himself is tethered to the Lord. And it does not matter which situation he's in. It doesn't matter which physical prison he might be in. He is a prisoner to the Lord. Now, the difference between being in prison in Rome and being a prisoner to the Lord is that he is a willing prisoner. That if you elected to follow Christ, if you've made the decision in your life to align it with Jesus, and you've invited Jesus into your heart, we're tethered to him. We are willing prisoners to God Almighty. And Paul is saying, "I, prisoner of the Lord." And then what he does is he begins to call on you and me. Not just the church of Ephesus, but he's calling on us. He's challenging us to first walk in a way that is worthy of our calling. Everybody say walk. Yep. Then he describes what that looks like by saying, walk with humility and gentleness and patience. Awful words. And third, he says, accept one another in love. And what he's describing is that if we can do that, if we can walk in humility and we can walk in patience and we can accept one another in love, then we ourselves will be unified, not just with one another, but with Christ. With one Spirit. Paul is saying, if you'll walk in humility, if you'll walk in love, if you'll walk in patience, if you'll walk in, if you expand this, to walk in the way that God has called us to walk, then we will find unity. But what I do when I read this passage, and I think a lot of people do the same thing, is we read this and the word that stands out to me in this passage is my calling. So we all want to know our calling. What am I called to do? What is my calling? When I read this passage and I go, okay, walk in a way that's worthy of your calling. What I hear is, dress for the job you want, not the job that you have, right? Like, what is my calling and what do I get out of this? How do I walk in a way and get something from God? What is my calling? And a lot of us, we ask this question, but the problem, as with most problems, is never the problem. Most of our problems are, there we are. Can we stay this way? Is this romantic? Should we all just there we are. All right, that's fine. All right, no, it's fine. We can go dark. The problem, everybody's moving. We're fine. We're going to be all right. It's the lighting. We had some issues. No big deal. Here we go. The problem with most problems is not the problem. The problem that we end up with most problems is our response. It's how we solve the problem. That ends up being the real problem. When you encounter something, there I am. When you encounter something, the problem is that those are really bright. Those are brighter than normal. I'm getting a sunburn as I stand here. I got SPF on, we're fine. The problem is rarely the problem, it's our response to the problem. We don't know how to respond when things happen. We don't know how to respond when the lights suddenly go dark. And the problem is how we respond and what happens when we look at our calling. And when we look at Ephesians and Paul says, hey, walk in the way that's worthy of our calling, the immediate thing that we do is we all know what we're called to do, but Paul is telling us how to find out. If you've ever asked, what am I called to do? Paul's already told you. What is God calling me to do? Paul's telling you. But here's the deal, and this is a sidebar. Not that big of a sidebar, it's just a little bit of a sidestep. Is that I've told you this before, I believe less in a calling, and I believe in callings. I think if we align ourselves with a single calling, we're going to be really disappointed in life. That if we have a calling, I am called to preach this sermon. When I get to this point and I preach this sermon, then all of a sudden I'm done. God's done with me tomorrow. And I just take the week off, right, until I'm called again. Or I'm disappointed because I didn't fulfill my calling the way I wanted to, and then I'm over. But the reality is that God doesn't just give us a single calling, but He keeps calling us. That you don't have a calling, but you have callings. And I don't know what your calling is right now, but I know it's probably not going to be the same call in a month or 6 months or a year from now. That if we get locked into this thing where I've already fulfilled my life's mission, then we're disappointed. God's not done with you, and He keeps calling you. This weekend, Saturday, we had Preston and some of his family. They were here painting the bathrooms of our church. The bathrooms need painting. Was that Preston's calling in life? God, I hope not. I hope God has called you to more. You know what I mean? Like, if so, then you're done. You've capped out, you peaked early, and thanks for doing that. The idea isn't that God called him for that moment, it's that God is continuing to call him. There were people who cleaned our church this weekend. Was that their calling? No. Not an overarching calling, but that is our callings. God is compelling us and moving us and drawing us, and He keeps calling us to what needs to be done. And what's beautiful is that we get so caught up in what we're called to do that we totally bypass this passage. That the passage says, walk in a way worthy of your calling. The emphasis is not on your calling. The emphasis is on the way that we walk. And a lot of us want to know our calling to see how it benefits our lives. How is my life going to be better? How am I going to be made more famous? Or how am I going to align my pocketbooks or beef up my Instagram account? Like, how is my calling going to benefit me? But Paul is not talking about our calling as much as he's talking about the way we walk. And what's beautiful about the way we walk is that the way we walk will reveal the place that God's calling us. It'll reveal our callings. If you've ever wondered what your calling is, what your place is, what your purpose is, I'm telling you your place. I'm telling you your purpose. Paul is telling you that your calling is to walk in humility, in patience, and the other things. You're to walk in a way that's worthy of your calling. And what's wonderful about Preston is he's actually been here painted before. And because he is walking in humility, and I don't want to build him up too much because he's probably got flaws too, I'm sure. We can call those out next week. But he's walking in humility, and he's walking diligently in patience, and he's loving one another. And while he's walking, he's aware of what needs to be done, and he's stepping into it. And a lot of us, we're not walking in humility, so we're not aware of how God wants to use us. We're just looking forward and going, how's God going to use me so that I can be better? How's God going to use me so that I can benefit myself? But the reality is your calling is not yours. It's not yours. We think it's our calling. It's my calling. It's what God's calling me to do. We want to understand our calling as it pertains to us, but we rarely seek to find our calling to serve others. And when we reverse it and we walk with humility and patience and gentleness, all of a sudden we're aware that God is calling us all the time. It's not a single calling. It's not a one-time deal, but He's moving you into a position, into a place to see what God wants for us. Today, there are some people that stepped into a calling by running sound and lights. Today, there are people that stepped into a calling to greet. Right now, there are people stepping into a calling to babysit. Someone's probably changing your kid's diaper. That's not their calling overarching, but that is their walk in humility and gentleness, stepping into where God needs to use them, and they're watching. It's revealed to them how God is using us. And I need you to know that your calling is not yours. Your calling is not yours. In Ephesians 4, it says there is one body and one spirit, just as you were called to one hope and at your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all. Over 7 times, so exactly 7 because I counted. In this version, 7 times the word one comes into play. That God is reminding us, Paul is reminding us from his prison tethered to the Lord, that your calling is not yours, but it's God's. That your calling is not yours, but it's God's. The calling that God has given you is not for your benefit, but for God's. But here's the deal. The way that you walk is for your benefit. The way that you walk is for your benefit, as it puts us in a position to hear and to see and to be revealed with the direction we're supposed to go. That your calling is not yours, but how you walk is for your benefit. And it will benefit your life if you follow Him, walking in humility and gentleness, loving everyone. Then God begins to move you into a space, and you see an issue or a problem, and you step into it and you solve it. You step into this calling for this moment. And yeah, Preston's calling for Saturday was to paint the church. This morning I had a few things to mop up. That was my calling for that moment. Because as humility and gentleness, we walk and we start seeing where God's leading us. For you, your calling might have been to help somebody on the side of the road on your way to church. To you, your calling might be to encourage someone or send them a text thanking them for being who they are. And I don't know what your calling is right this second, but don't get so locked in that you miss what God wants to do with every single moment of your life. That you're just waiting for these big cosmic moments for God to use you. God wants to use you on a regular basis, so walk worthy of your calling. Can you imagine a painter with incredible skills, but never willing to share their work with anyone? I'm so thankful that Miss Kristen, who does great work, has been willing to share her work on a regular basis with our kids. She hand draws all of our kids' coloring sheets. So that coloring sheet you get on the way home, you're like, this is great, toss. She hand drew that. That was her work that she's sharing with the world. Can you imagine a teacher who's got a beautiful gift of educating and explaining and helping? There's something so wonderful about a teacher who's a good teacher. If you've ever had a bad teacher, you know the difference. Can you imagine a teacher with the gift of teaching, never willing to share, never willing to help educate or inform people? That there's something so sad about the gifts that we allow to lie dormant because we don't see how they fit. We don't see how there's a need for them, or we don't think that people want our gift. We don't think God is calling us because He called us at one point in our lives, and now as we age, somehow we age out of God's ability to call us. It's a young man's game. But it's not. God is still calling us. He still wants to use our gifts. But it's human nature for us to want to compare ourselves to someone else. If you've ever done this, then you're breathing, and if you're breathing, you've done this. You've looked at what you have to offer the world, and you've compared it to what other people have to offer the world. And you've inevitably either felt prideful or felt disappointed. When we compare ourselves to someone else, we either feel better than them or we feel worse than them. More often than not, we feel worse than them. What happens when we compare is we end up setting ourselves to fail. That God hasn't created you to compare yourself and your gifts and your calling and your walk to anyone else's. That we measure what God has called us to do against Him. We measure the way He's called us to work against the Scriptures. And God is compelling us to use our personality and our gifts to serve others. Not to serve self, but to serve others. Personality is what distinguishes real music from elevator music, right? Both are music by definition, but personality is what changes it. We were in Nashville last weekend, rode a lot of elevators, and you hear that sort of, every time my wife hears like a jazzy elevator song, she's like, I can't understand why you hate jazz, you love jazz music. That's not jazz music. That's elevator jazz music, Like I got a record next door we can listen, and that's jazz music. What you hear in an elevator is not jazz. It's someone with a keyboard typing something and making some kind of music that's not personal. And personality transfers something so beautiful into something so boxy and so unimportant and so easily dismissed in background music. See, what God wants to do is He wants to take you from being background music, and He wants to use your personality to push you to the forefront of what He wants to do. Because your calling is not yours. The way that you walk is critical and is important, but your calling is not yours. The way that you walk actually ends up helping you to find your abilities. The way that you walk helps you see what giftings God has given you. The way that we walk and the things that we involve ourselves in end up helping you see your purpose, or purposes with an S. And it's very easy for me to try to paint and realize painting's not my calling. It's just not my gifting. And I'll do it. I'll throw paint on a wall and everywhere else, but it's not my gifting. But see, as I walk humbly and willing to do whatever needs to be done, then I begin to see what God has gifted me to do. I begin to see how God is using me. But a lot of times we look at what needs to be done and we say, that's not for me, I can't do that. Or we'll make this beautiful excuse, I'll pray about it. I'll pray about it. Ryan did a great job talking about giving. You may have heard that and go, I'll pray about it. There's nothing to pray about. It's already in the scripture. There's nothing to pray about. You might think, I need to volunteer here. There's nothing to pray about. You don't need to pray about volunteering and serving. God has already moved you to a place and invited you and He's gifted you by the fact that you have 2 hands and 2 feet to step into whatever role needs to be filled. And so walk humbly. Walk willing to use whatever gifts you've been given. But many times we look at our abilities and we wonder if God had given them to us. We wonder if God passed us when passing out abilities, but I believe He's gifted every single one of us. And He hasn't passed anyone by. That He's gifted you with the personality and the creativity that is uniquely you. But a lot of times we don't understand who we are because we're trying to understand how we benefit the world when God is inviting us to serve the world. Just serve the world. Just serve the world. Just start serving people. Start locally. Start with the people in your household and just start serving people. And watch how God begins to use you and move you into something beautiful. That's the picture of the church. That's the picture of the kingdom of God. Is Him using us all, understanding that we're all important. The second thing I want you to know is that your calling is extremely valuable. It's valuable. If you've ever thought I'm not valuable, then you're wrong. Ephesians 4:7 says, now grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of the Messiah's gift. For it says, when He ascended on high, He took prisoners into captivity. He gave gifts to people. We are all very diverse. I want you to underline the word diverse. And we live in a very diverse day and time. And Paul is describing grace. He's not describing salvation grace in this particular passage. He's describing grace when using your gift in the context of the church or for Christ. But there's a lot of grace, meaning all that paint that's all over the bathroom that I actually did. There's a lot of grace in that. Like God's looking past that because I tried, right? Preston's a better painter than me. God gives us grace when using our gifts. But what I want to point out is that Paul describes diversity. And I feel like this word is kind of a buzzword right now because we are an extraordinarily diverse culture. And what's happened through politics and on is that we as human beings have started seeing diversity as a bad thing. We started seeing how our diversity divides us. We started seeing how our diversity pulls us apart. And because of arguing and fighting and a lack of humility and a lack of walking diligent and a lack of love for one another, diversity has by and large divided us. However, I believe diversity in the context of the church is beautiful. It's not a bad thing, it's a beautiful thing. It's a God thing. That our diversity is actually what pulls us together. It's what defines us as a city. It's what makes us as a community of faith beautiful. This past weekend, I preached at a fairly large church, and most of the people, good or bad, looked like me. And it was not that exciting. No offense if anyone's listening, but the idea was that I love being in a diverse environment. I love being in a diverse city. I went this morning to the grocery store down the street, to Walmart, and I go there often throughout the week because it's the closest one. And I always get really strange looks because I'm not just the only white person. I'm the whitest person. Like, I am not just a white person, I am the whitest. And I get looks like, are you sure? Are you lost, boy? Do you need me to help you find home? But I love it. There's this lady there, and I can't remember her name, but she has really big hair and a lot of makeup and jewelry, and she's the most emphatic person that I've ever met. And when you walk in, she's like, hey, baby! And you just feel love, you know what I mean? It happened this morning. It just made my day. It's probably why I'm in such a good mood. And I love it. And what I love about going to that grocery store is that by going to that grocery store, I make that place diverse. Isn't that funny? That I don't just go for the diversity, I am diversity. I go in and I make that place unique because I step into this environment that I probably don't belong in, and I step into it and I make it unique, and I'm friendly. And my goal is to start getting to know people so they're like, oh, it's you again. I just want that to happen. It makes me feel so good. The idea is that diversity doesn't divide us, it's actually what unites us. And we've had people that have come to this church before. And they're already gone, so we can talk about it, it's fair. But they've come, and they've been here, and they've been an older couple, and they've gone, hey, there's just nobody like me here, so we're going to go find someplace else. Okay, fine. I've had young people that come and go, oh, there's just not enough young people like me, so we're going to find some, okay, fine, Oh, there's nobody that's at my level, or whatever. Different people have gone. One guy left because he didn't believe in women as pastors. Okay, that's fine. But what's happened is we've actually positioned ourselves as human beings to think that everyone has to look, smell, act, and believe like me in order for me to fit. And how sad is that? How sad is that for me to look around a room and think everyone has to look just like me, that I can't learn from you because you're older or you're younger, I can't learn from you because you're a female, I can't learn from you because you believe different, or you live different, or you sin different, that I actually think we learn from one another when we're diverse. And I love looking across this room. We're pretty diverse. And I think it's fantastic. And it's not what divides us, it's actually what unites us. And if you've ever put a puzzle together, I don't know if you've ever done that, but I've done that once in my life. And you take a puzzle, and depending on how elaborate it is, it could be like thousands of pieces, which is mind-numbing. But every single piece is cut out a little different. And every piece has a little different picture on it. And you don't see when you hold a single piece how it fits. And then when you start putting it together, you see how it works. And everything's different, but it fits together. And then all of a sudden it reveals this beautiful picture of whatever you're putting together, like a skyscraper or a meadow or whatever. Any picture word you want to put in there. That's the picture of this church. Is that you're this strange, weird-shaped puzzle piece. Let's just call it the way it is. You are a weird-shaped puzzle piece, and you've got a picture in your life that you don't really fully understand or see. And when Paul describes us as walking worthy, as you're walking in humility and diligence and one love, you start seeing how your piece fits right into this puzzle. And when you step back, you see that all together we make up this picture of Jesus. You look like Jesus. That we together start looking like Jesus, but it's our diversity that actually brings us together, as Paul continues to describe. In Ephesians 4:11, he says, "And he personally gave some to be apostles and prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the training of the saints in the work of ministry, to build up the body of Christ until we reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of God's Son, growing into a mature man with a stature measured by Christ's fullness." I don't have time to work through these 5 main gifts of ministry, but I hope to do that through a podcast, go deeper. But I want to continue in verse 14. It says, "Then we will no longer be little children tossed by the waves and blown around by every wind of teaching, by human cunning and cleverness and the technique of deceit." It's describing us coming together, working together, learning from one another. Other passages say iron sharpening iron. That we're learning from each other, we're growing, that no longer will we be children, as Shante described her kids at the beach getting tossed around by waves. We are like that as Christians sometimes. And we're only as strong as our community. We're only as strong as our ability to link arms, to hold on to one another, and to withstand whatever comes our way. That our community and our tribe is critical. But if we're children, we're small, we're young, we're weak, we have an opportunity to grow. And I think being in community like this is what helps us grow. And if this community is not helping you grow, please find one that will. But make sure that you've leaned fully into this one, that you've grabbed everything that you can out of this community, and that you're taking advantage of the wisdom that's here from people who are older than you. Make sure that you're taking advantage of the wisdom from people who are younger than you, who don't look or believe like you, that we learn together. And the last thing I want you to know is that your calling, you're responsible for it. You're responsible for your calling. You have a divine calling to be you. And maybe you don't like you, and that's a different conversation, but you have a divine calling to be you, that your uniqueness is not a virtue, it's a responsibility. That God has called you to be uniquely you because there's someone around you waiting for you to be you. That I can't control how God uses me, but I can control how I walk. And if I walk in humility and gentleness and patience, loving one another, I can walk into a Walmart full of people that don't look like me, that don't maybe live in the same areas or believe the same way, and I can find how God wants to use me in that moment because I'm able to or willing to walk in humility. That what it comes back down to is you and I evaluating and analyzing and looking deep into our walk. It's less about your calling, which is where we focus, and more about your walk. It's less about what God is calling you to do. Don't stress that. That's out of our control. But what we do is we focus on things that are out of our control, but miss the things that are well within our control, which is how we walk. And if we'll walk in a way that is pleasing to the Lord, and we hear from God clearly, and we're open to the idea that God will use us in ways we never thought possible, then your calling will be revealed to you moment by moment, step by step, that we'll walk in humility, gentleness, and patience, accepting one another in love. And then the passage wraps up in verse 15. It says, "But speaking the truth in love." Let us grow in every way into Him who is the head, Christ. From Him, the whole body, fitted and knit together by every supporting ligament, promotes the growth of the body for building up itself in love for the proper working of each individual part. I love this. It echoes what he says in 1 Corinthians, and AJ spoke to this last week, that we're all important, that we're all needed, that we all fit together like a weird puzzle. That is us. And what happens when we do that is we edify, we glorify, we point people to Christ. You see, here's the deal with our lives, is that I often wrestle with being remembered. Like, I want to be remembered. Like most of you, I want to be remembered. I don't want to be forgotten easily when I pass. But the other day I saw something somewhere, and it challenged this idea that I want to be remembered. It says, I don't want to be remembered, I want Christ to be remembered. I don't want to be remembered, I want Christ to never be forgotten. See, the challenge as we look at our life and our legacy is not to be remembered, but to make sure that as we live, we pointed people to Jesus so He's never forgotten. So how do you walk? How is your walk? Are you walking with humility and gentleness and patience? Are you willing to love and to accept one another? Are we walking in a way that God has called us, or worthy of the calling that we've lived? Are we walking in a way that positions us to be ready to step in to where and when God wants to use us? See, I often find that my life is just about me because it's so easy to get self-centered and focused on self. And everything I do is to make my life easier, to make my kids' lives a little better. Everything I do is to make everything about me. The problem is that I have to turn this out to make my life about others. How can I live to make others' lives better? How can I live to serve others? How can I live every moment making sure that the people around me see God? That's our calling, to walk humbly. And when we'll walk humbly, we'll stop seeing and making decisions based on what benefits us, and we'll start making decisions based on what helps others. So let's walk humbly. Let's evaluate areas of our life where we've made pride priority. Let's look at areas of our life where we started living in unification over unity. The unification is this idea that everyone has to be like me, versus unity where we're able to fit in and help and benefit the lives of the people around us. And we change, we shift our focus, our mindset, and then you're going to see how God uses you. If you've ever wondered, can God use me? Start walking humbly and gently and watch how God uses you. And then your calling will be revealed on a regular basis. And we'll live a life that's more fulfilling. So let's do that. That's our challenge, is to leave this space in just a few moments after volunteer dinner and look for ways that God can use us. If you would, go ahead and bow your head and close your eyes. Father, we thank you that you've called us, you've commissioned us, you've set us apart and set us aside for your work, for good work. And though it's very challenging for us to see what you've called us to do, and so often when we find what you've called us to do, we try to figure out how it makes our lives better. But God, may we turn our focus off of ourselves and onto others. May we walk with humility and gentleness and patience and love one another. And if we'll choose to position ourselves in this way, we'll see that there are a lot of needs around us. May we never wake up feeling like we don't have purpose. May we never wake up and feel like we're not needed. Because there are people waiting for us to be who you've called us and created us to be. So may we stop rejecting that idea. Stop trying to be someone else. Stop forcing others to fit our ideal of who they should be. And let's just walk with humility and love for you. So lead us. Guide us and help us become aware of where you're leading us and how you're guiding us, so that we may walk in your ways. So Father, we thank you. In Jesus' mighty name we pray, amen. If you would stand.